When my daughter-in-law blew off the biggest milestone of my life for a casual dinner with her friends, I didn't beg for respect. Instead, I quietly changed the locks, shut down the accounts, and let Forbes show them exactly who they had underestimated. The roast had been sitting on the heavy oak dining table for exactly 2 hours, and the golden brown crust was already completely cold. Tonight was supposed to be my 71st birthday, and it coincided with the biggest news of my life. My life's work, the organic bakery chain I had spent decades building from scratch, had just been acquired by a major West Coast food conglomerate for a life-changing sum. I sat entirely alone in the dimmed kitchen of my own home in the suburbs of Chicago. My son Julian and his wife Vanessa had promised me up and down that they would be there by 7 to celebrate this massive milestone. Around 9, I finally heard the familiar metallic scrape of the key in the front door. Vanessa walked in, first arms loaded with high-end shopping bags from downtown. Her phone was pressed to her ear, and she was laughing loudly at some superficial gossip with her friends. Julian followed her, his head down, eyes glued to his smartphone, shoulders slouched forward. Neither of them even glanced at the beautifully set table. There wasn't a single word of apology for being 2 hours late. When I calmly brought up the time, Vanessa just gave a dismissive wave. She said she'd stumbled upon an unbeatable sale at a boutique and then grabbed a quick bite with her crew at a trendy new bistro. The fact that tonight was my major milestone didn't seem to hold a shred of importance in her self-centered world. Julian stayed silent, as he always did when his wife dominated the room. As I wrapped up the cold roast and put it in the fridge, without a word, he just mumbled weakly that I shouldn't be so sensitive that Vanessa had a brutally stressful week at work. In that exact moment, a switch flipped. No tears, no screaming match. I just felt a deep, clear coldness wash over me. This ignorance wasn't an isolated incident. It was the final straw in a long line of disrespect in my own home, a home they lived in without ever paying me a single dime in rent. I looked at Vanessa, who was already pouring herself a glass of my expensive wine without asking. Without saying another word, I walked out of the kitchen and went to my bedroom. The first step toward a radical change would begin tomorrow morning, right before the banks opened. At exactly 8 in the morning, I was sitting at the desk of my local bank branch downtown. On the joint savings account I had set up years ago for Julian's future real estate plans, an account I funded monthly from my business. There was a substantial sum that Vanessa had secretly earmarked for a new luxury SUV. With a few precise clicks, I permanently separated the accounts and revoked Julian's power of attorney over my personal finances. It was my money earned through decades of backbreaking work in the bakery while everyone else was sleeping. When I got back home, I waited patiently until the two of them were sitting at the kitchen island. Vanessa was bored, scrolling through her tablet while Julian sipped his coffee. I placed a simple sheet of white paper exactly between them. It wasn't some complicated legal threat. It was a detailed breakdown of the new household rules and the monthly flat rate for utilities, electricity, and groceries due immediately and upfront. Vanessa's face darkened the second her eyes hit the numbers. She let out a scoff and asked if this was some kind of sick joke, adding that we were family, not roommates. I looked her dead in the eye without blinking and told her calmly that family is built on reciprocity and respect. Starting today, everyone pays their fair share, or the spacious upstairs suite would be put to better use. Julian swallowed hard, staring down at his coffee cup, looking at his wife for help. Vanessa hissed that she wasn't going to put up with this power trip and that she'd rather spend her hard-earned money on things that actually mattered in life. I took the paper back without a word, gave a brief nod, and walked toward the front door. The locksmith I had called an hour ago was just pulling into the driveway. It was time to draw some undeniable physical boundaries in this house, so everyone understood exactly who owned the property. The piercing whine of the drill echoed through the hallway as the locksmith replaced the deadbolts to my private home office, the basement, and the pantry. Vanessa came charging down the stairs from the upper suite, visibly furious. It was Saturday, and she had intended, as she always did, to raid my well-stocked pantry to whip up an upscale dinner for her friends. When she reached the solid wood door and found it locked, she rattled the silver knob in utter disbelief. I stood in the hallway, the new set of keys resting in my palm, and watched her calmly. She spun around and yelled at me, asking what this childish game was supposed to mean, and calling it an absolute insult. In a completely flat, businesslike voice, I told her that everything behind those doors was my personal property. If you can't bother to show up for my birthday, you don't get to cook with my groceries. Julian hurried into the hall, looking incredibly anxious as he tried to play the peacemaker. He pleaded with me under his breath to just take the locks off, arguing that it was ruining the entire vibe of the house. But I stood my ground, slipping the keys into my coat pocket. I packed my suitcase for a 3-week trip to Boston that I had been planning for a long time. The main floor of the house would be completely locked down while I was gone, at least my portion of it. Before heading out the door, I canceled the monthly auto draft for Julian's expensive car insurance. As I let the heavy front door click shut behind me, I could hear Vanessa throwing a tantrum in the background. They had no idea that this was just the gentle beginning of a very uncomfortable new reality. The weeks in Boston flew by. I enjoyed the crisp Atlantic air, caught up with old business partners from the food industry, and focused entirely on my next venture. For the most part, my phone stayed wonderfully silent. Neither Julian nor Vanessa sent a single text, likely holding out in the stubborn hope that I would eventually break and apologize for being too harsh. It was a healing, incredibly liberating silence. I didn't block their numbers, but I chose not to respond to the few half-hearted calls from Julian. They only ever rang anyway when the company gas card or the home internet line, which ran through my old business account, suddenly stopped working. When I permanently moved into my new modern condo in the city, 3 months later, they only found out because the movers were actively loading a massive truck in the driveway. Vanessa stood at the upstairs window with her arms crossed, watching the whole scene with a sneer. She probably still thought I was just staging some temporary drama to get attention. Julian finally came outside, his voice shaking, as he asked who was going to cover the massive heating and electric bills for the big house now. I looked at him feeling no pity, only the absolute certainty that I was doing the right thing. I handed him an official lease agreement for the upper level. If they wanted to stay, they would pay market rent, otherwise I was turning it over to a property manager to find a reliable family. I got into my car and drove away without looking back. A whole year passed and I cut off contact completely. I built my new life from the ground up while they woke up to the brutal reality of their own finances. A year later, Julian was sitting in the sleek, high-end waiting room of his CEO's private clinic. He was accompanying the executive to an important corporate health summit, desperate to make a stellar impression and finally secure a promotion he'd been chasing. To kill the agonizing wait time, he reached for the glossy business magazines laid out on the marble coffee table. Under normal circumstances, he would never glance at a serious publication like Forbes, but a familiar face on the cover of the latest special edition caught his eye. His heart started hammering against his ribs as he frantically flipped through the pages until he hit page 45. There, taking up a full 2-page spread, was a professional striking portrait of me. I was looking directly into the camera with absolute confidence, elegantly dressed with the stunning architecture of my latest eco-friendly senior living development rising behind me. The bold headline read, "The Retiring Giants: How a Late-Stage Pivot Generated Millions." Julian stared at the text in absolute shock. His fingers were visibly trembling as he read the financial breakdowns. It stated in black and white that the proceeds from the sale of my bakery chain had been aggressively and brilliantly reinvested multiplying my private net worth several times over. The mother he had spent years dismissing as a quiet, ordinary woman in the background was now one of the most influential real estate investors in the region. He felt his chest tighten as the room started to spin. With shaking hands, he immediately dialed Vanessa's number. The illusion of the helpless, dependent mother they had built up in their minds shattered into a million pieces in a single second. Dear Quiet Revenge community, many of you have asked how you can help support the channel. We believe in being transparent. AI tools may assist with some technical aspects of production, but every story is carefully selected, edited, reviewed, and prepared by real people who care deeply about the quality and message behind each video. Our goal has always been simple: to share meaningful stories that remind us of the importance of dignity, courage, family, and perseverance. If you would like to help us continue this work, please consider contributing the cost of a small cup of coffee. Patreon, https://www.patreon.com/Quiet Revenge Family, Ko-fi, https://ko-fi.com/The Story Family, PayPal, https://www.paypal.com/PayPalMe/Kan Huangmin. Thank you for your kindness, your comments, and your continued support. Vanessa was standing in a packed grocery store checkout lane when Julian's urgent call came through. His voice was completely unrecognizable, a hoarse, panicked stutter. He practically ordered her to drop everything, find the current issue of Forbes on the rack, and buy it immediately. When she held the heavy magazine in her hands and saw my face splashed across the inner pages, her cheeks flushed a deep, burning crimson from sheer shock and envy. The family group chat, which I had silently walked away from months ago, instantly exploded with furious messages back and forth between the two of them. How could she keep this from us? Vanessa typed her thumbs, slamming aggressively against her screen. Why didn't she say a single word about this kind of money? We're family. We are legally entitled to a stake in this. To Vanessa, my financial triumph wasn't a milestone to celebrate. It was a personal insult and a direct betrayal of the lifestyle she envisioned for herself. She felt cheated because I hadn't willingly handed over my wealth to fund their luxury vacations and high-end spending. Julian tried to calm her down via text, but a bitter, painful realization was settling into his own gut. They had treated the very woman who had single-handedly secured the financial foundation of their lives like an inconvenient burden. Now they had to watch from the sidelines as they realized I never needed them. I was independent, incredibly wealthy, and entirely out of reach of their greed. Vanessa shoved the magazine into her bag, eyes flashing, and decided right then that it was time for an unannounced visit. It was a stormy, rainy Thursday afternoon when the intercom buzzer at my new condo started ringing persistently. I pulled up the video feed, opened the heavy door, and found myself looking straight into Vanessa's engineered, plastered-on smile. Held out in front of her was a gourmet cake from the most expensive bakery in the city. A transparent, almost laughable attempt to bridge months of icy silence. Julian stood behind her, his shoulders slumped, looking thoroughly humiliated. "Hi, Mom," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with a sugary sweetness I had never heard from her before. "We've missed you so much. We really need to just sit down and talk about everything." I stood firmly in the wide doorway, my hand gripping the inside handle, making it explicitly clear that I wasn't stepping back to let them into my home. My gaze moved coldly from the expensive cake up to Vanessa's shifty eyes. I didn't say a word. I just let the silence stretch out. The tension in the bright hallway grew so thick and heavy that Vanessa started shifting uncomfortably from foot to foot. Her fake smile began to freeze. "We saw the Forbes feature," Julian added quietly, unable to handle the agonizing quiet. "We're so incredibly proud of you, Mom. Can't we just come in and toast to your success?" I have my CPA and a major investment partner arriving in exactly 10 minutes, I replied, my voice steady, professional, and entirely detached. I don't have time for catching up, and you can take the cake with you. I haven't eaten processed sugar in a year. Vanessa took a sharp, audible breath, her eyes narrowing into slits. Oh, come on, stop being so dramatic. Vanessa snapped, suddenly her voice instantly dropping every ounce of its manufactured sweetness. You have millions sitting in the bank, and you're letting your own son suffocate in that outdated house, while we can barely scrape together the monthly payments on our car. It's incredibly selfish and vindictive of you. A small smile almost touched my lips at the sheer predictability of it. It felt profoundly validating to see that she couldn't even keep her true intentions hidden for 5 minutes, the second she didn't get her way. I completely ignored her outbursts and turned my attention directly to my son. And you? Do you agree with your wife? I asked him bluntly. Julian looked down at the floor, utterly incapable of meeting my gaze. He mumbled weakly about how family is supposed to pull together during tough times, and that this money would make life significantly easier for everyone involved. In that moment, I didn't feel a drop of anger or sadness. All I felt was a deep, final confirmation that my choices had been entirely justified. Did you pull together for me on my birthday? I asked the question hanging heavily in the air. Were you there to support me when the acquisition went through? No. You were out shopping and celebrating with your friends. My money is staying exactly where it belongs, funded into my own projects. I slowly and deliberately closed the door, letting the heavy latch click firmly into place. I could hear Vanessa furiously pounding her fists against the solid wood outside until Julian finally dragged her away. It was their last desperate stand. 2 months later, the Regional Chamber of Commerce hosted a massive black tie gala at a luxury downtown hotel. I was invited as the keynote speaker to present on financial sovereignty in retirement and sustainable investing. Through my professional network, I knew well in advance that Julian's CEO held a VIP table at the event and would be bringing Julian along as his personal assistant. As I walked out onto the brightly lit stage of the grand ballroom, I spotted the two of them sitting at a table in the 3rd row. Julian's face drained of all color the moment he saw me standing at the podium in a tailored evening gown. I delivered my address entirely without notes, looking directly out at the crowd. I spoke about the grueling hours in the bakeries, the absolute necessity of cutting ties with emotional liabilities, and the importance of building your own foundation. Success, I said, pausing to lock eyes with Julian for several deliberate seconds, is not measured by how much you demand from other people. It is measured by what you build with your own 2 hands. Those who treat you as optional during the small beginnings have no right to a seat at the table when you reach the finish line. The applause that filled the ballroom was deafening, culminating in a standing ovation. Julian's CEO was clapping enthusiastically, leaning over to my son to tell him how brilliant and formidable I was. Julian could only give a robotic, hollow nod, cold sweat breaking out across his forehead. That evening, he finally understood the true gravity of what he had thrown away. The weeks blurred into months, and a deep, well-deserved peace finally settled over my life. Shortly after the gala, I sold the old family home to a wonderful young couple with 2 small children who were thrilled to take over the property. Julian and Vanessa were given a strict 30 days to pack up and find a modest apartment on the outer edge of the city, as they couldn't dream of affording market rent on the house by themselves. It was a harsh, but entirely necessary wake-up call for them. I didn't send angry letters, and I didn't demand an apology. I simply cut off the financial oxygen that fed their entitlement. Today, I'm standing on the sunlit terrace of my downtown condo, looking out over the city skyline and the river below. My latest venture, a foundation providing seed grants to young women entrepreneurs who don't have family financial backing, is thriving and brings me a profound sense of purpose. I had to learn the hard way that a shared bloodline does not guarantee respect, loyalty, or love. Sometimes you have to choose your own family, surrounding yourself with people who value you for who you are, not for what they can extract from you. My life has become light, perfectly structured, and filled with a beautiful clarity. When my next birthday comes around, the seats at my table won't be empty. They'll be occupied by people who genuinely want to be there. I take a sip of my tea, breathe in the quiet air, and know that I am the sole architect of my life. My foundation is built, and it is entirely unshakable. Dear Quiet Revenge community, many of you have asked how you can help support the channel. We believe in being transparent. AI tools may assist with some technical aspects of production, but every story is carefully selected, edited, reviewed, and prepared by real people who care deeply about the quality and message behind each video. Our goal has always been simple: to share meaningful stories that remind us of the importance of dignity, courage, family, and perseverance. If you would like to help us continue this work, please consider contributing the cost of a small cup of coffee. Patreon, https://www.patreon.com/Quiet Revenge Family, co-fi, https://ko-fi.com/The Story Family, PayPal, https://www.paypal.com/PayPal me/Kan Huang Min. Thank you for your kindness, your comments, and your continued support.